a man haunted by his past, a woman fighting for her people's future. When 5 lost children stumbled into his lonely cabin, neither could have imagined how their worlds would collide.
I ain't the kind of man who leaves children to freeze. That's all there is to it.
You saved these children when you could have turned them away. Why?
He was running from his demons. She was protecting her tribe. As danger closes in from all sides, 2 broken souls discover something unexpected in each other's eyes.
I've been alone so long, I forgot what it feels like to matter to someone.
You are worth something, Jonas Hale. You always were. You just forgot.
When the government demands the children be taken away, they must fight together or lose everything. But can a man who spent years in shadows learn to stand in the light of love? And will the tribe accept a white man with blood on his hands as one of their own? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The Montana Territory, 1875. Jonas Hale stood at the edge of his property, axe in hand, sweat dripping from his brow despite the autumn chill. The rhythmic sound of metal hitting wood echoed through the pine forest. Chop, breathe, chop, breathe. This had been his life for 3 years now, just him, the trees, and the ghosts of his past. Folks in the valley called him the shadow in the pines. He never went to town unless he had to, never spoke more than a few words to the shopkeeper when trading his firewood for supplies, never smiled. As the sun began to set, Jonas gathered his tools and headed back to his small log cabin. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming snow. Winter came early in these parts, and this one promised to be harsh. "Gonna be a cold one," he muttered to himself, his voice rough from disuse. His cabin sat in a small clearing, smoke rising from the stone chimney. It wasn't much, but it was his. No memories here, no blood, no screams, just silence. Jonas was stacking the freshly cut wood by the door when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Not the wind, not an animal, something else. He reached for the rifle he kept propped against the cabin wall, his body tense. The war might have been over for 10 years, but some habits never died. The sound came again, softer this time. A whimper. Jonas moved toward a large fallen cedar about 20 yards from his cabin. He approached slowly, rifle ready. When he reached the massive trunk, he peered over. 5 pairs of eyes stared back at him. Children, native children. The oldest couldn't have been more than 10. A girl with long black hair and fierce eyes that reminded Jonas of a fawn, watchful and ready to bolt. The youngest was barely more than a baby, clutched tightly in the arms of a boy who looked about 7. They were filthy, covered in mud and pine needles. Their clothes were torn and their small hands were blue with cold. They huddled together like a litter of abandoned puppies. Jonas lowered his rifle. "You hurt?" he asked, his voice scraping against his throat. The children said nothing, just stared. The oldest girl shifted slightly, putting herself between Jonas and the others. Jonas looked at the darkening sky, then back at the children. Night would bring freezing temperatures. These kids wouldn't survive. "Come on," he said, gesturing toward his cabin. "It's gonna get cold." When they didn't move, Jonas sighed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of jerky. He broke it into 5 pieces and held them out. The oldest girl hesitated, then took a piece and passed the others to the younger children. They ate quickly, their hunger evident in every desperate bite. "There's more inside," Jonas said, "and it's warm." After a moment, the girl nodded and helped the others to their feet. They followed Jonas like shadows, silent and wary. Inside the cabin, Jonas built up the fire until it roared. He pulled every blanket he owned from his trunk and handed them to the children. They wrapped themselves up, still not speaking, still watching him with those wide, cautious eyes. Jonas stirred the pot of stew that had been simmering all day. He dished out 5 wooden bowls and placed them on the table. "Eat," he said. The children didn't need to be told twice. They ate hungrily, though the oldest girl made sure the others had their fill before she touched her own. Jonas sat in his chair by the fire, watching them. Where had they come from? Why were they alone? He didn't ask. Questions meant answers, and answers meant involvement. Jonas had learned the hard way that involvement led to pain. But as he watched the smallest child fall asleep mid-bite, something stirred in his chest. something he thought had died long ago in the blood-soaked fields of the war. When they finished eating, Jonas cleared a space on the floor near the fire and laid out some furs. "You can sleep here," he said. The children curled up together like a litter of pups, all except the oldest girl, who remained sitting, her eyes fixed on Jonas. "My name is Little Fawn," she said suddenly, her voice soft but clear. Jonas nodded. "Jonas Hale." "Are you going to hurt us?" she asked. The question hit Jonas like a physical blow. "No," he said firmly. "No one's going to hurt you here." Little Fawn seemed to consider this. "We got lost. The river took us away from our people." Jonas nodded again. He knew the river that ran through the valley could be treacherous, especially after the rains. "Thank you for the food," Little Fawn said. Then she joined the others on the makeshift bed. Jonas didn't sleep that night. He sat by the fire, rifle across his lap, listening to the soft breathing of the children and the howl of the wind outside. For the first time in years, his cabin felt like something more than just a place to escape his memories. It felt almost like a home. When dawn broke, Jonas was still sitting in his chair. The children woke one by one, their eyes immediately finding him, as if making sure he was still there. He fed them again, cornbread and the last of his honey. They ate in silence, but the fear in their eyes had lessened. Jonas was just thinking about what to do next when he felt it. A change in the air. The birds outside had gone quiet. The wind seemed to hold its breath. Then he heard it. Hooves, many of them. "Stay here," he told the children, grabbing his rifle and heading for the door. What he saw made his blood run cold. At least 100 native warriors on horseback surrounded his cabin, their faces painted for war, their weapons at the ready. They formed a perfect circle around his property, silent and menacing in the grey morning light. Jonas had seen enough battles to know when he was outmatched. He slowly placed his rifle on the ground and raised his hands. A tall warrior on a painted horse rode forward. His face was lined with age and battle scars, and his eyes bore into Jonas with an intensity that spoke of grief and rage. "I am Tall Elk," the warrior said in English, "chief of the Blackfoot. You have something that belongs to me, white man." Before Jonas could respond, the cabin door creaked open. Little Fawn stepped out, followed by the other children. "Uncle!" she cried, running toward Tall Elk. The chief's stern expression softened for just a moment as he looked at the children. Then his eyes hardened again as he turned back to Jonas. "Why are they inside your house, white man? Why did they sleep under your roof?" His voice carried the edge of a threat. Jonas removed his coat slowly, making sure all could see he had no hidden weapons. He raised his empty hands and looked Tall Elk straight in the eye. "Because they were cold," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "And I ain't the kind of man who leaves children to freeze." Tall Elk's expression didn't change. "White men have taken enough from us. Our land, our buffalo, our people." He gestured to his warriors. "Take the children." 2 warriors dismounted and approached the cabin. But as they reached for the children, something unexpected happened. The youngest child began to cry, clinging to Jonas's leg. The others moved closer to him too, looking not at the warriors with fear, but at Jonas with trust. "He never touched us," Little Fawn said loudly, stepping between Jonas and her uncle. "He gave us warm bread. He told us a story about a brave horse. He called me Little Miss." The warriors exchanged glances. Even Tall Elk seemed taken aback. "He is a good man," Little Fawn continued. "He saved us when the river tried to take us away forever." Tall Elk studied Jonas for a long moment. Then he dismounted and approached, stopping just a few feet away. "Our people have searched for these children for 3 days," he said. "We thought them drowned in the crossing, or worse, taken by men who trade in such things." Jonas felt sick at the thought. "I found them yesterday, under that cedar." He pointed to the fallen tree. "They were cold and hungry. That's all I know." Tall Elk's gaze was penetrating, as if he could see straight through to Jonas's soul. Jonas met his eyes without flinching. He had nothing to hide. Not about this, anyway. After what seemed like an eternity, Tall Elk spoke again. "You will come with us." Jonas tensed. "As a prisoner?" "As a guest," Tall Elk replied, though his tone made it clear Jonas would be watched. "The children trust you. That is, unusual. Jonas looked at the 5 small faces watching him. He thought about his quiet cabin, his solitary existence, the peace he'd found in isolation. Then he thought about the warmth he'd felt last night, with the cabin full of life for the first time in years. "All right," he said finally, "I'll come." One of the warriors brought forward a horse for Jonas. As he mounted, Little Fawn came to stand beside him. "Will you tell us another story tonight?" she asked. Jonas looked down at her hopeful face, then at the wary expressions of the warriors surrounding him, and finally at Tall Elk, who watched him with guarded curiosity. "Yeah," Jonas said softly. "I reckon I will." As they rode away from his cabin, Jonas felt something shifting inside him. For years he'd walked toward exile, away from the horrors of his past. Now for the first time he was walking toward something else, toward people, toward connection, maybe even toward healing. He didn't know what awaited him at the Blackfoot camp. But as Little Fawn rode beside him, occasionally glancing up with a small smile, Jonas realized that for the first time in years, he was curious about tomorrow. And that feeling, strange as it was, felt almost like hope. The journey to the Blackfoot camp took most of the day. Jonas rode in silence, surrounded by warriors who watched his every move. Only Little Fawn and the other children seemed happy, chattering among themselves in their native tongue. As they traveled deeper into the pine-covered mountains, Jonas felt the weight of eyes upon him. These weren't just any warriors. They were men who had lost much to people who looked like him. People who had broken promises, stolen land, and destroyed lives. "You do not speak much," Tall Elk said, riding up beside him. Jonas shrugged. "Ain't got much to say." "The children tell me you spoke to them, told them stories." Jonas kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "They needed comfort." Tall Elk studied him. "Why do you live alone in the forest, Jonas Hale?" The question hung in the air between them. Jonas had avoided thinking about the answer for years, let alone speaking it aloud. "Some men ain't fit for company," he finally said. Tall Elk nodded as if this answer made perfect sense. "And yet you took in 5 strange children without question." Before Jonas could respond, Little Fawn rode up between them on her small pony. "Jonas is coming to live with us now, Uncle?" she asked, her face bright with hope. Tall Elk's expression softened when he looked at his niece. "He is our guest, Little Fawn, for now." The girl beamed at Jonas. "I will show you where the best berries grow and where the eagles nest and—" "Little Fawn," Tall Elk interrupted gently, "ride ahead and tell your grandmother the children are coming home." With a nod, Little Fawn kicked her pony forward, the other children following close behind. "Her parents?" Jonas asked once they were out of earshot. Tall Elk's face darkened. "Dead. Soldiers came to our hunting camp last winter. They said we were too far from the reservation." His voice was flat, but his eyes burned with old pain. "Little Fawn's father, my brother, tried to explain we had permission to hunt there. They shot him. And when her mother screamed, they shot her too." Jonas felt sick. He'd seen such things during the war, the casual cruelty of men with guns and power. He'd been one of those men once. "I'm sorry," he said, knowing the words were hollow. "Your sorrow does not bring them back," Tall Elk replied, "but you kept their children safe. That is something." They crested a hill and Jonas saw the Blackfoot camp spread out in the valley below. Dozens of teepees formed a circle around a central clearing. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and horses grazed in a meadow nearby. Children played, women worked at tanning hides, and men sat in council. It was a scene of life, of community, that Jonas had avoided for years. As they rode into camp, activity stopped. Everyone turned to stare at the white man riding among their warriors. Jonas kept his eyes forward, his back straight. An old woman rushed forward as Little Fawn dismounted. She embraced each child, tears streaming down her weathered face. When she finished, she looked up at Jonas with surprising fierceness. "Grandmother," Little Fawn said excitedly, "this is Jonas. He gave us food and a warm place to sleep." The old woman, Morning Sky, Tall Elk's mother, approached Jonas as he dismounted. She studied him with eyes that seemed to see right through him. "You saved my grandchildren," she said in halting English. Jonas shook his head. "Just gave them shelter. Anyone would have." "No," she said firmly. "Not anyone. Not these days." She touched his arm gently. "You have my thanks." A crowd had gathered now. Jonas could feel the mix of curiosity and hostility. A tall man pushed his way to the front, his face twisted with anger. "Why is this white man here?" he demanded, speaking to Tall Elk, but glaring at Jonas. "Have we not had enough of their kind?" "Peace, Running Wolf," Tall Elk said. "He saved the children when the river took them." Running Wolf spat on the ground. "And now he expects what? Our gratitude? Our trust?" He stepped closer to Jonas. "I know your kind, white man. You take and take until nothing remains." Little Fawn moved to Jonas's side. "He is good, Running Wolf. He told us stories and gave us honey." Running Wolf's expression softened slightly when he looked at the girl, but hardened again when he turned back to Jonas. "The council will decide what to do with him," he said before stalking away. Tall Elk sighed. "Running Wolf lost his wife and sons to smallpox brought by traders. His anger runs deep." He gestured for Jonas to follow him. "Come. You will stay in my teepee tonight. Tomorrow the council will meet." Jonas was given a place to sleep in Tall Elk's large teepee. The children stayed with their grandmother, though Little Fawn visited before bedtime, bringing him a bowl of stew. "Grandmother made it special," she said proudly, "with buffalo meat." Jonas accepted the bowl with a nod of thanks. "Your grandmother seems like a good woman." Little Fawn sat cross-legged beside him. "She is the wisest in the tribe. Even the men listen to her." She watched him eat for a moment. "Why do you live alone, Jonas?" Jonas paused, the spoon halfway to his mouth. He'd been asked this question twice today after years of no one caring enough to ask. "I've done things," he said slowly. "Bad things, during the war and after." He set the bowl down. "Sometimes being alone is better, safer for everyone." Little Fawn considered this. "But you're not alone anymore." Before Jonas could respond, Tall Elk entered the tipi. "It is time for sleep, Little Fawn. Your grandmother is looking for you." The girl nodded and stood. "Good night, Jonas. I will see you tomorrow." After she left, Tall Elk sat across from Jonas, the fire between them casting shadows on the tipi walls. "The council meets at midday tomorrow," he said. "Some will speak against you staying." Jonas nodded. "I understand. I can go back to my cabin." "Is that what you want?" The question caught Jonas off guard. Was it what he wanted? 3 days ago, the answer would have been simple. But now... "I don't know," he admitted. Tall Elk studied him. "There is a shadow in your eyes, Jonas Hale. The same shadow I see in warriors who have seen too much death." Jonas looked into the fire. "I was a scout for the Union Army. I tracked deserters." The words came slowly, painfully. "After the war, I worked for the railroad, hunting men they said were causing trouble." "And were they causing trouble?" Jonas's jaw tightened. "Some were. Others were just trying to protect what was theirs." He looked up at Tall Elk. "I didn't ask questions, I just did my job until..." "Until," Tall Elk prompted when Jonas fell silent. "Until they sent me after a family. Man, woman, 3 kids. Railroad wanted their land." Jonas's voice grew hoarse. "I found them, but I couldn't. I walked away, left the company, came here." Tall Elk nodded slowly. "And now you punish yourself with loneliness." Jonas had never thought of it that way, but the words rang true. "Maybe." "Sleep now," Tall Elk said, rising. "Tomorrow will bring its own troubles." Morning came with a flurry of activity in the camp. Jonas emerged from the teepee to find children staring at him openly, while adults pretended not to notice him as they went about their work. Little Fawn found him quickly, pulling him by the hand to show him around the camp. The other 4 children followed, now clean and dressed in fresh clothes. "This is where we tan the hides," she explained, pointing to where women worked with scrapers and stretching frames. "And there is where the men make arrows. And over there..." "Little Fawn," a woman called. "Come help with the cooking." The girl sighed. "I have to go, but I'll find you later." Jonas watched her run off, feeling strangely lost without her guidance. He wandered toward the edge of camp, finding a fallen log to sit on. From here, he could see the mountains rising in the distance, the same mountains visible from his cabin window. "You are the white man who saved the children." Jonas turned to find a young woman standing nearby, a basket of herbs in her arms. Her long black hair was braided with small shells woven into the plaits, and her eyes were direct and unafraid. "I just gave them shelter," he said. "I am Swiftdeer," she said, ignoring his modesty. "Little Fawn is my cousin." Jonas nodded in greeting. "Jonas Hale." "Little Fawn says you told stories. What kind of stories?" "Just stories about horses, nothing special." Swiftdeer sat beside him, her basket in her lap. "We value stories here. They carry our history, our wisdom." She sorted through her herbs as she spoke. "What is your story, Jonas Hale?" "Not one worth telling," he replied. She looked at him then, really looked at him. Everyone's story matters, even the painful ones, especially those. Before Jonas could respond, drums began to beat from the center of camp. "The council is gathering early," Swiftdeer said, standing quickly. "Come, they will want you there." In the central clearing, the tribal elders had assembled in a semicircle. Tall Elk sat in the center, with Morning Sky beside him. Running Wolf and several other men Jonas hadn't met sat to either side. The whole tribe gathered to watch. Jonas stood at the edge of the clearing, acutely aware of being the only white face in a sea of brown ones. Tall Elk gestured for Jonas to step forward. Reluctantly, he did. "This man, Jonas Hale, saved the children of my brother when the river took them away," Tall Elk announced. "We have called this council to decide what happens now." Running Wolf stood immediately. "The white man should return to his cabin. We cannot trust his kind." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "He has done nothing to harm us," Swiftdeer called out unexpectedly. "He saved the children when he could have turned them away." "One good deed does not erase the crimes of his people," Running Wolf countered. Morning Sky raised her hand and the crowd fell silent. "I have listened to the children," she said, her voice carrying despite its softness. "They speak of this man with trust. Little Fawn says he calls her Little Miss with respect in his voice." "The children are too young to understand the danger," another elder argued. As the debate continued, Jonas stood silent. These people had every reason to distrust him, to fear him. He represented everything that had brought them pain. Suddenly, Little Fawn broke from the crowd and ran to his side, taking his hand. The 4 other children followed, surrounding him in a protective circle. "He is our friend," Little Fawn declared loudly. "He made the bad dreams go away." A hush fell over the gathering. Even Running Wolf seemed taken aback. "What does she mean?" Tall Elk asked. Little Fawn looked up at Jonas. Tell them what you did when Spotted Rabbit had the bad dream." Jonas cleared his throat uncomfortably. The little one, Spotted Rabbit, woke up crying, said he saw his parents in his dreams but couldn't reach them. He shifted his weight. I picked him up, told him sometimes dreams are just dreams, and that his parents would always be watching over him." Morning Sky's eyes filled with tears. Running Wolf looked away. "There is another matter we must discuss," Tall Elk said, changing the subject. "The Indian agent has sent word. He wants the children sent to the mission school." Gasps and angry mutterings erupted from the crowd. "They will not take our children," Running Wolf declared fiercely. "If we refuse, they may send soldiers," another elder warned. "They wish to erase who we are," Morning Sky said sadly. "To make our children forget their own people." Jonas listened, a cold feeling growing in his gut. He'd heard about these schools, heard what happened to the children sent there. Without planning to, he found himself speaking. "I won't let that happen." All eyes turned to him. "This ain't my business," he continued, his voice growing stronger. "I know that. But those children..." He looked down at Little Fawn and the others. "They deserve better than to be torn from their people." Running Wolf studied him with new interest. "And what would you do to stop it, white man?" Jonas met his gaze. "Whatever needs doing." Tall Elk raised his hand for silence. "We will continue this discussion. For now, Jonas Hale will remain with us. The children trust him, and we may need that trust in the days ahead." As the council disbanded, Jonas felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. These children had awakened something in him he thought long dead. Little Fawn squeezed his hand. "You're staying?" Jonas looked down at her hopeful face, then at the wary but curious faces of the tribe around him. "For now," he said. "For now." And for the first time in years, that didn't feel like a temporary answer. Days turned into weeks, and Jonas found himself settling into a rhythm at the Blackfoot camp. Each morning, he joined the hunters, his skills as a tracker earning reluctant respect. Each evening, he sat with the children, telling them simple stories about horses, brave dogs, and the stars above. Little Fawn rarely left his side when he was in camp. She appointed herself his guide and teacher, showing him their ways with the earnest determination only a child could muster. "No, Jonas," she would say, laughing. "You hold the needle like this." Or, "That is not how you say thank you. Listen again." The other children followed her lead. Even Spotted Rabbit, the youngest, who had been the most traumatized by the river and the loss of his parents, began to smile again. Running Wolf still watched Jonas with suspicion, but even he had stopped openly challenging his presence. Others, like Swift Deer, seemed genuinely curious about the quiet white man who had saved their children. One evening, as Jonas sat mending a tear in his shirt, Swift Deer approached with a steaming bowl. "You missed the evening meal," she said, offering him the food. Jonas accepted it with a nod of thanks. "Was helping Grey Horse fix that broken wagon axle." Swift Deer sat beside him, watching as he ate. "You work hard, even on things that are not your concern." Jonas shrugged. "Got to earn my keep." "The children are enough reason for you to be here," she said, "especially now." The threat from the Indian agent hung over the camp like a storm cloud. Twice already, messages had come demanding the children be sent to the mission school. Twice Tall Elk had replied that the children were still recovering from their ordeal and could not travel. "He won't wait forever," Jonas said grimly. "No," Swift Deer agreed. "The agent has sent word he is coming himself. In 3 days." Jonas set down his bowl. "Does Tall Elk know?" She nodded. "A rider brought the message today. The council meets tonight to decide what to do." Jonas looked across the camp to where the children played, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The thought of them being taken away, forced into harsh discipline, and forbidden to speak their language made his stomach turn. "What will they decide?" he asked. Swift Deer's eyes were troubled. "Some say we should hide the children in the mountains until the agent leaves. Others say we must stand firm and refuse him to his face." She hesitated. "Running Wolf says we should fight." Jonas shook his head. "Fighting would only bring soldiers. More death." "I know," she said softly. "But what choice do we have? The agent has the law on his side." Jonas thought about this. The law. Always the law. The same law that had let the railroad take land from families. The same law that pushed native peoples onto smaller and smaller reservations. "Sometimes the law ain't right," he said finally, "but fighting it head-on rarely works." Swift Deer studied him. "You have something in mind." It wasn't a question. Jonas realized she had been watching him more closely than he thought. "Maybe," he admitted, "but I need to think on it more." Later that night, Jonas stood at the edge of the council meeting. Tall Elk had not invited him to speak, but had not asked him to leave either. The elders debated back and forth, their voices growing more heated as the evening wore on. "We cannot give up our children," Morning Sky said firmly. "Not to people who will teach them to be ashamed of who they are." "But if we refuse and they bring soldiers," another elder countered, "we risk the lives of the entire tribe." Running Wolf stood, his face set in hard lines. "Better to die as Blackfoot than to live as slaves. I say we send the agent back with an arrow in his heart." Murmurs of both approval and dismay rippled through the gathering. Tall Elk raised his hand for silence. "Violence will only bring more violence. We must find another way." "What other way is there?" Running Wolf demanded. "They take our land, our buffalo, and now they want our children. Where does it end?" From his place at the edge of the circle, Jonas cleared his throat. All eyes turned to him. "May I speak?" he asked Tall Elk. The chief nodded, though some of the elders frowned at this breach of protocol. Jonas stepped forward, uncomfortable with the attention but determined. "The agent's coming in 3 days. To him, I'm just another white settler. He don't know I'm living here with you." "What are you suggesting?" Tall Elk asked. Let me go meet him. Halfway between here and the agency. I'll tell him I'm looking after the children as a favor to you while they recover, that they're staying at my cabin." Running Wolf snorted. "And why would he believe that?" "Because it's almost true," Jonas replied, "and because it gives him a way to save face. He reports to his bosses that the children are being civilized by a white man. Everyone's happy. Except us," Morning Sky said. "Our children would still be away from their people." Jonas shook his head. "They wouldn't be. That's just what we tell the agent. The children stay here with you. I'll take them to my cabin only when the agent's due to check on them." A thoughtful silence fell over the council. "It could work," Tall Elk said slowly. "For a time." "It's a lie," Running Wolf objected. "Hiding behind falsehoods instead of standing proud." "It's keeping the children safe," Jonas countered. "Sometimes that means not fighting every battle head-on." Running Wolf glared at him. "Easy for you to say. Your people aren't the ones being pushed to the edge of existence." Jonas met his gaze steadily. "You're right. I can't know what that's like, but I do know something about picking the right battles and about keeping children from harm." Morning Sky spoke up. "I believe Jonas speaks wisely. This buys us time. Time for the children to heal fully. Time for us to plan for the future." Tall Elk looked around the circle of elders. "We will vote. Those in favor of Jonas's plan, raise your hand." One by one, hands went up. Morning Sky, Grey Horse, several others. In the end, even Running Wolf raised his hand, though he did it with clear reluctance. "It is decided," Tall Elk announced. "Jonas will meet with the agent, but," he added, looking directly at Jonas, "you will not go alone. Swift Deer will accompany you. Her English is good, and she can speak for our people if needed." Jonas nodded, glancing at Swift Deer, who seemed as surprised by this decision as he was. The next morning, Jonas and Swift Deer prepared to leave for his cabin. They would need a day to make it look as though the children had been living there. Little Fawn watched them pack with worried eyes. "You are coming back, Jonas?" Jonas knelt down to her level. "Course I am, little miss. Just going to talk to a man who's worried about you and your cousins. Tell him you're all doing fine." "But what if he wants to take us away?" she asked, her voice small. "Not gonna happen," Jonas said firmly. "Not while I'm around?" Little Fawn studied his face, then nodded, apparently satisfied by what she saw there. "Swift Deer will take care of you," she said seriously. "She knows all the best medicine plants." Jonas smiled slightly. "I'm sure she does." As they rode away from camp, Swift Deer led the way along a narrow trail that cut through the pine forest. They traveled in comfortable silence for the first hour, the only sounds the creaking of saddle leather and the soft thud of hooves on the forest floor. "You are good with the children," Swift Deer finally said. "They trust you." Jonas shrugged. "They're easy to like." Not all men would think so, especially children not their own, not like them. Jonas thought about this. Children are just children, don't matter where they come from or what they look like. Swift Deer glanced back at him with an appraising look. "You speak simply, but your words have depth." Jonas wasn't sure how to respond to that, so he said nothing. They reached his cabin by midday. It stood just as he had left it weeks ago, though fallen pine needles covered the path and a family of squirrels had clearly made themselves at home in one corner of the roof. "It's not much," Jonas said as he dismounted. Swift Deer slid from her horse and looked around. "It is a good place, strong walls, good view of the valley." She turned to him, "but lonely." Jonas busied himself with unlocking the door, not meeting her eyes. "I was used to it." "Used to," she repeated, "but not anymore." Before he could answer, the cabin door swung open, and they stepped inside. A thin layer of dust covered everything, but otherwise it was just as Jonas had left it. "We'll need to make it look like the children have been here," he said, changing the subject. "Gather some extra blankets. Maybe move that table against the wall to make more floor space." Swift Deer nodded and set to work. They spent the afternoon cleaning and rearranging, working side by side with an ease that surprised Jonas. Swift Deer was practical and efficient, but she also had a way of making the work feel almost pleasant. As evening approached, she went outside to gather herbs for their supper, while Jonas built a fire in the hearth that had been cold for weeks. "Your home is different now," Swift Deer said when she returned. It feels warmer. Jonas looked around the cabin. With the fire crackling and the space arranged for children, it did feel different, less like a place to hide and more like a place to live. It's temporary, he said, just until we convince the agent the children are better off here than at that school. Swift Deer began preparing a stew with the rabbits Jonas had snared earlier. And then? And then what? What happens when the agent is convinced? Will you return to living alone? Jonas hadn't thought that far ahead. The idea of going back to his solitary existence made his chest tighten in a way he hadn't expected. I don't know, he admitted. Swift Deer added herbs to the pot. The children would miss you. Little Fawn especially. I'd miss them too, Jonas said quietly, surprising himself with the honesty. They ate supper in front of the fire, sitting on the bearskin rug that Jonas had spread out where the children would supposedly sleep. Tell me about before, Swift Deer said as they finished eating. Who were you before you came to this cabin? Jonas stared into the fire. Nobody worth knowing. I do not believe that, she said. The man who saved those children was always inside you, even when you did things you now regret. Jonas looked at her sharply. How do you know I have regrets? Everyone has regrets, she said simply. But yours sit heavy on you. I can see it in how you hold yourself, in how you look at the world. Jonas was silent for a long moment. I was a hunter, he finally said, not of animals, of men. He told her then about the war, about tracking deserters, about working for the railroad afterward, forcing people from their land. He told her about the family he was sent to remove, the father who had stood on his porch with a shotgun, the mother with a baby on her hip, the two older children hiding behind her skirts. I was supposed to scare them off, burn them out if they wouldn't. Go, Jonas said, his voice hollow. But I couldn't do it, not to those kids. So I left, told the railroad they were gone, came up here where nobody knew me. Swift Deer listened without interruption, her face thoughtful but not judgmental. You chose to walk a different path, she said when he finished. That took courage. Jonas shook his head. Not courage, just couldn't stomach it anymore. That is the beginning of courage, she insisted, to know when something is wrong, even when others say it is right. They fell silent, watching the fire burn down to embers. We should sleep, Swift Deer finally said. Tomorrow the agent comes. Jonas nodded. You take the bed. I'll sleep here by the fire. Swift Deer looked as if she might argue, but then nodded and rose gracefully. Good night, Jonas Hale. Good night, he replied. As he lay on the bearskin rug staring at the ceiling, Jonas realized something strange. For the first time in years, he was not alone in his cabin. And for the first time in years, he didn't mind. Morning came with a cold rain beating against the cabin roof. Jonas rose before dawn, restless with the knowledge of what the day would bring. He built up the fire and put coffee on to boil. Swift Deer emerged from the small bedroom, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger somehow, less guarded. You are worried, she observed, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. Agent's got the law on his side, Jonas said. Not sure my plan is going to work. Swift Deer touched his arm lightly. You are not alone in this now. Something in her touch, in the simple certainty of her words, steadied him. He nodded once, grateful in a way he couldn't express. They were just finishing a breakfast of cornbread and dried venison when they heard horses approaching. Jonas moved to the window, peering through the rain. 2 riders, he reported. One's wearing an agency coat. Swift Deer joined him at the window. The other is a soldier. Jonas felt his jaw tighten. Stay inside. Let me talk to them first. He stepped out onto the porch as the riders approached, keeping his hands visible and his expression neutral. The agent was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a sour expression. The soldier beside him was young, barely more than a boy, looking uncomfortable in the rain. Morning, Jonas called. You folks look like you could use some coffee. The agent peered at him through rain-speckled spectacles. Are you Jonas Hale? Jonas nodded. Jonas leaned against the doorframe. Their uncle Tall Elk asked me to look after them while they recover from their ordeal. Pritchard's eyes narrowed. You're friendly with the Blackfoot? I trade with them. They're good neighbors. I see. Pritchard didn't sound convinced. I'll need to see the children. They're to be enrolled in the mission school immediately. Jonas shook his head. Afraid that's not possible today. They're not here. Not here. Pritchard's voice rose. Where are they? Their grandmother took them gathering roots and herbs yesterday. Got caught in this rain, so they stayed at the camp overnight. Should be back tomorrow or the next day. The agent's face reddened. This is unacceptable. Those children are wards of the government now. They need proper education, proper civilization. Swift Deer chose that moment to step out onto the porch. She had pulled her hair back and put on one of Jonas's old shirts over her dress, clearly trying to appear as civilized as possible. Mr. Pritchard, she said in careful English, the children are well cared for. Jonas teaches them English, I teach them to read. Pritchard looked between them, suspicion plain on his face. And who are you? Swift Deer, she replied. I help care for the children. The agent's lip curled slightly. I see. Well, this arrangement is highly irregular. The policy is clear. Native children are to be educated in proper schools. And they will be, Jonas said smoothly. Once they're fully recovered. The youngest still has nightmares about the river, wakes up screaming most nights. This at least was true. Jonas could see the soldier shifting uncomfortably, his young face softening with sympathy. I can give you a week, Pritchard said finally. 1 week, then I'll return and the children will come with me to the mission school. Is that clear? Jonas nodded, hiding his relief. Crystal clear. We'll have them ready. As the agent and soldier rode away, Swift Deer turned to Jonas. 1 week is not much time. It's enough, Jonas said, though he wasn't sure that was true. We'll think of something. They rode back to the Blackfoot camp that afternoon, the rain finally letting up as they traveled. When they arrived, Little Fawn ran to meet them, her face anxious. Did the bad man come? Does he want to take us away? Jonas lifted her onto his horse. He came. But you're staying right here, little miss, I promise. The relief on her face made his heart ache. As they rode into camp, he saw Tall Elk and the council waiting, their expressions grave. We have 1 week, Jonas told them. After that, he'll be back. Running Wolf stepped forward. Then we have 1 week to prepare for battle. No, Jonas said firmly. There's got to be another way. But as he looked around at the worried faces of the tribe, at the children who had come to trust him, Jonas wondered if he was right. Was there another way? Or was conflict inevitable? He didn't have the answer yet, but he had 7 days to find one. 7 days to save these children who had somehow become so important to him. 7 days to finally face the world he'd been hiding from for so long. The next 7 days were the longest of Jonas's life. The entire tribe gathered daily to discuss options, but each plan seemed more desperate than the last. We could take the children deep into the mountains, one elder suggested, where the agent cannot find them. And live like fugitives, Morning Sky countered. Always looking over our shoulder, that is no life for children. Running Wolf remained convinced that force was their only option. We have warriors, we have weapons. Let them try to take our children. But Jonas had seen too much war to believe that violence would solve anything. They'd send more men, he argued, soldiers, maybe even the cavalry. You can't win that fight. On the 3rd day, a rider brought news that made the situation even more dire. Agent Pritchard had been seen at Fort Harrison, speaking with the commander. He would not be returning alone. He means to take the children by force, Tall Elk said grimly. That night, Jonas couldn't sleep. He walked to the edge of camp, staring at the stars and trying to think of a solution. He had always been good at disappearing, at walking away from trouble, but this time, walking away wasn't an option. You should rest, Swift Deer said, appearing beside him. Tomorrow will be another long day. Jonas shook his head. Can't sleep. Keep thinking there's an answer right in front of me, but I can't see it. Swift Deer stood quietly beside him for a moment. You care for these children, for our people. It wasn't a question, but Jonas answered anyway. I do. Why? She asked. Most white men would not trouble themselves with the fate of native children. Jonas thought about it. When I found them under that tree, they were so small, so scared, but they looked at me like I could help them. He swallowed hard. Nobody's looked at me like that in a long time, like I was worth something. Swift Deer's hand found his in the darkness. You are worth something, Jonas Hale. You always were. You just forgot. The warmth of her hand in his gave Jonas a clarity he hadn't felt in years. I need to go to Helena, he said suddenly. Helena? The territorial capital? Why? There's someone there who might help us. A lawyer I once knew. He wasn't afraid to stand up to the railroad. Maybe he's not afraid to stand up to the Indian agency either. Tall Elk was skeptical when Jonas proposed the idea the next morning. A white man's lawyer? Why would he help us? Because what the agent is doing isn't right, Jonas insisted. And this lawyer, Marcus Finch, he cares about what's right. At least he used to. Running Wolf scoffed. White men's laws are not made to protect our people. Maybe not, Jonas conceded. But sometimes they can be used that way if you know how. In the end, Tall Elk agreed that Jonas should try. We have few options left. If this lawyer can help, we must try. Little Fawn was distressed when she learned Jonas was leaving. What if you don't come back? She asked, her voice trembling. Jonas knelt before her. Little miss, I promise you I'm coming back. Nothing could keep me away. She studied his face, then nodded solemnly. I believe you. Swift Deer insisted on accompanying Jonas. Two voices are stronger than one, she said when he tried to argue. And I want to see this lawyer for myself. They rode hard, stopping only when necessary. Helena was a 2-day journey, and they had no time to waste. As they traveled, Jonas found himself talking more than he had in years, telling Swift Deer about his life before the war, about the family farm in Ohio, about his brother who hadn't come home from Gettysburg. She listened, sometimes asking questions, sometimes just riding in companionable silence. Jonas realized he had never felt so comfortable with another person. Helena was bustling when they arrived, the streets crowded with wagons and horsemen. The territorial capital had grown since Jonas had last seen it, with new buildings springing up on every corner. They found Marcus Finch's office above a hardware store on Last Chance Gulch. The lawyer was older than Jonas remembered, his hair now more grey than black, but his handshake was firm and his eyes were sharp. Jonas Hale, he said, genuine surprise in his voice. Last I heard you'd disappeared into the wilderness. Nearly did, Jonas admitted. Finch invited them in, eyeing Swift Deer with curiosity, but no hostility. He listened intently as Jonas explained the situation. So you want me to stop the Indian agent from taking these children to the mission school? Finch summarized when Jonas finished. That's a tall order, my friend. Is it possible? Swift Deer asked. Finch leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Technically, the agent is acting within the law. The government's policy is clear. Native children are to be educated in government-approved schools. Jonas's heart sank. I didn't say that, Finch replied. There may be a way. The law also states that native children can remain with their tribe if they have a suitable guardian who can provide proper education. But the agent won't consider the tribe suitable, Swift Deer said. No, Finch agreed. You're already claiming to care for these children. If you were to become their legal guardian with the tribe's blessing, Finch trailed off. Would that work? Jonas asked, hope rising. It might, Finch said cautiously. It would be unusual, but not unprecedented, and it would give the children a foot in both worlds. Swift Deer looked at Jonas intently. Would you do this? Legally bind yourself to these children? Jonas didn't hesitate. Yes. They spent the rest of the day drafting documents. Finch explained that Jonas would need to establish a school on or near the tribal lands, where the children could be educated without being separated from their people. The agent won't like it, Finch warned, but if we do this right, he won't have grounds to object. They rode back even harder than they had come, pushing their horses to the limit. When they reached the Blackfoot camp, they found a scene of near panic. The agent returned early, Tall Elk told them grimly. With soldiers. They will be here tomorrow at midday. Jonas explained Finch's plan to the council. Some were skeptical, but Morning Sky immediately saw its value. The children would stay with us but have the protection of white law, she said. It is a good plan. But it means accepting that they must learn the white man's ways, Running Wolf objected. They must learn to survive in a changing world, Morning Sky replied. And they will also learn our ways, our stories, our pride. Both can be true. The council debated late into the night. In the end, they voted to accept Jonas's proposal, with conditions. The school would be built at the edge of tribal lands. The children would learn English and arithmetic, but also Blackfoot language and traditions. And Jonas would not be alone in teaching them. Swift Deer will teach alongside you, Tall Elk declared, so our children learn from both our peoples. Jonas glanced at Swift Deer, who smiled slightly and nodded her agreement. Morning dawned clear and cold. The tribe prepared to meet the agent and his soldiers with dignity rather than weapons. Jonas stood at the front of the gathering, legal papers in hand, Little Fawn and the other children beside him. When Agent Pritchard rode into camp, he brought 10 soldiers with him. His face darkened when he saw Jonas. "Mr. Hale," he said coldly, "I see you're still interfering in government business." Jonas stepped forward, holding out the documents Finch had prepared. "Not interfering, Agent Pritchard, just doing things properly." Pritchard scanned the papers, his frown deepening. "What is this nonsense?" "Legal guardianship," Jonas explained. "I'm assuming responsibility for these children with the tribe's blessing." "This is highly irregular," Pritchard sputtered. "I don't recognize this arrangement." "The territorial court does," Jonas replied. "These papers have been filed and approved. The children stay here." "This is not over, Hale. I'll be taking this to my superiors." "You do that," Jonas said evenly. "In the meantime, the children stay here." After a tense moment, Pritchard turned his horse. "1 month," he said over his shoulder. "I'll be back in 1 month to inspect this school of yours. If it's not up to standard, I'll have those children removed. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear," Jonas replied. The tribe watched in silence as the agent and soldiers rode away. Only when they had disappeared from sight did a cheer erupt. Little Fawn hugged Jonas fiercely. "You came back," she said. "How you kept your promise." "Always will, little miss," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. The next weeks were a flurry of activity. The entire tribe helped build the schoolhouse at the edge of their land, using logs from the forest and stones from the river. Jonas sent for books and slates, spending nearly all his savings. Swift Deer proved to be a natural teacher, patient but firm. She worked alongside Jonas, their partnership easy and comfortable. In the evenings, they would sit together, planning lessons and talking long after the work was done. One night, as they sat outside the nearly completed schoolhouse, Swift Deer asked the question Jonas had been avoiding. "Will you go back to your cabin?" Jonas looked at the camp in the distance, at the smoke rising from cooking fires, at the children playing in the last light of day. Then he looked at Swift Deer, at the question in her eyes. "No," he said simply. "My place is here now. If the tribe will have me." Swift Deer's smile was like the sunrise. "I think that can be arranged." When Agent Pritchard returned a month later, he found a proper schoolhouse with 10 students, the original 5 children and 5 others from the tribe. Jonas and Swift Deer taught reading, writing, and arithmetic in the mornings. In the afternoons, the tribal elders taught traditional skills and stories. Pritchard inspected everything with a sour expression, clearly looking for faults to find, but even he had to admit that the arrangement met the letter of the law. "This is most unusual," he said as he prepared to leave. "I cannot say I approve." "You don't have to approve," Jonas replied. "You just have to respect the law." As the agent rode away, Tall Elk came to stand beside Jonas. "You have done a good thing here," he said. These children will grow strong in both worlds. Jonas nodded. That's the hope. That evening, the tribe held a celebration. There was dancing and singing around a great bonfire. Jonas sat with the elders, watching as the children played and the younger men and women danced. Morning Sky settled beside him. "My son tells me you are staying with us." "If that's all right," Jonas said. The old woman smiled. "More than all right. The children need you. The tribe needs you." She glanced meaningfully at Swift Deer, who was teaching Little Fawn a dance step. "And I think others may need you too." Jonas felt his face warm. "I'm not sure I'm worthy of all this." "That is not for you to decide," Morning Sky said firmly. "The Creator brought you to those children for a reason. Who are you to question such wisdom?" Jonas had no answer for that. He watched as Little Fawn broke away from the dancers and ran to him, her face glowing with happiness. "Jonas, come dance with us." In the past, he would have refused, would have hidden behind his guilt and shame. But the man who had lived alone in the cabin, the shadow in the pines, was fading away. In his place was someone new, or perhaps someone who had been there all along, just waiting to be found. "I don't know how," he admitted. Little Fawn took his hand. "I'll teach you." As he allowed himself to be pulled toward the circle of dancers, Jonas caught Swift Deer's eye. She smiled at him, a smile full of promise and possibility. Around them, the tribe celebrated. The children were safe. The future, while uncertain, held hope. And Jonas Hale, once a ghost of a man, had found something he thought lost forever. A home, a purpose, a family. The next morning, Jonas stood at the edge of camp, watching the sunrise. The mist rose from the pines like spirits reaching for the sky. In the distance, he could see his old cabin, small and solitary on the mountainside. Swift Deer joined him, slipping her hand into his. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "Your solitude?" Jonas thought about it. "No," he said finally. "Turns out being alone isn't the same as being at peace." "And are you at peace now, Jonas Hale?" He looked down at their joined hands, then back at the camp where Little Fawn and the other children were beginning to stir. "Getting there," he said honestly. Swift Deer nodded. "That is enough. For now." Together they walked back to camp, back to the children who had changed everything, back to the life Jonas had never thought possible. Behind them, the mist continued to rise from the pines, but Jonas no longer walked in shadows. For the first time in years, he walked in the light. In the tribal council that winter, when the snow lay deep and the stories were long, Tall Elk gave Jonas a new name. He who lit no fire for himself, only for others. But now, the elders agreed, his own fire burned bright again, kindled by 5 small hands that had reached for him in the darkness, tended by a people who had every reason to turn him away, but instead welcomed him home, and in that fire, Jonas Hale found his redemption. The end